last night with us. He's moving up to Auckland. So this is a goodbye, and we'll pray for him at the end. But in the meantime, he's been, he probably won't tell you this, but he's a very gifted man, and he's a bit of an engineer and a designer and an inventor. And he's been working away the last couple of years down at Naumai in his workshop there, and he has invented this, and actually you've worked on it too, Gordy, haven't you? This house, this pod that you can buy and you can put up in just in half an hour or so, and you've got a house. Is that right? You've got a.
In a day, so it takes a day. Probably.
Oh, it takes a whole day. Okay, well I'm exaggerating. It's all right. I'm a pastor. I'm allowed to exaggerate a little bit, but Tony's going to speak the truth anyway tonight. I thought it was quite quick, but it's the whole day. But you can build a house in a day. I mean, that's pretty awesome, isn't it? And then you can pack it down again and take it off to the next place. So anyway, he's invented this, and it's probably going to go worldwide and be amazing. But he's found Raglan that's been a little bit limited for his market, so he's having to move, and he's had a few little challenges we might hear about. But he's an awesome man, an awesome man of God, and I think we're going to. The other thing, although we're saying goodbye to Tony tonight, he's going to be back because he loves surfing, he loves Raglan, he loves Surfside, he loves you guys, and his plan is at some point to come back and live here permanently, but that might be a few years away. But in the meantime, we're saying goodbye later tonight, but we're expecting to see you often, Tony. All right? Yeah, cool. Okay. All right. Well, we've laid the groundwork. Now let's pray for him, shall we? Let's reach out our hands and just pray for God's blessing. Lord, we thank you for Tony. We thank you for the journey that he's been on and is continuing on with you. We pray for your anointing and your blessing on him as he shares with us tonight. Pray that we'd have open hearts to receive. Thank you, Jesus. Amen. Amen.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm sorry that I was a bit delayed. I thought it started at 7, so you might have been just staring at the wall. So what I'm actually going to talk about tonight, I've had quite a, right from when I was a child, I've sort of had talents and stuff that I sort of never could quite grasp. I was brought up in a small community, a place called Apanaki in Taranaki. I was brought up on a dairy farm. So I had a pretty privileged life really, because we, even though we only milked 130 cows, we sort of had a good lifestyle and had horses and motorbikes and what have you right through the whole lot. So it was good. But so what I'm actually going to talk about is sort of, for a start, was that I'll sort of skip a lot of things because I sort of want to get back into the later stuff later on in the present. So I'll just sort of run through a few things. So like I said, I was brought up in Opanaki on a dairy farm. I've got 2 other brothers and a sister. I was the second. My sister was tragically killed in a car accident when she was 18 years old, which is pretty unfortunate. My father, he was a very talented man as well. He travelled when he was about 18 years old. He left on a ship overseas, and he travelled the world, worked here and there, but went to every place, pretty much every country in the world when he was 18 years old. He was a very talented pianist. He couldn't read about any music whatsoever, but as long as he knew what key it started in and heard the tune, he'd just go and play it. Just, yeah, amazing. So he was, and he was also very talented, but in our family sense as such, is that they were all hard workers. They were sort of founding farmers, and so to them, honesty was hard work. So it was, whether it was practical or being sensible about it, it was, as long as you worked hard, you were sort of being honest. So I was sort of brought up in that, as it's gone along, it's got easier, but I was brought up in that sort of field. My father had a very hard life. He actually got a job on the Queen Mary to be a pianist, and his father wrote him a letter and said, "Look, boy, if you're not home within 6 months, I'm selling the farm," and that's it. So he quit, didn't actually get to start the job, came home and worked on the farm. So he also was a haemophilia, so he had major problems. So haemophilia is when you start bleeding, is that you don't stop. So he was very limited in what he could do. So he sort of, when he was young and stuff, he spent quite a bit of time in hospital. He'd fall over and he'd end up in hospital more or less. So he had a lot of challenges in his life. He just passed away this year, but he was an overcomer. So someone said to me once, there's only two people that they know that could survive a nuclear disaster, and one's a cockroach and the other one was him. So it sort of said a lot for him. He was a real battler sort of a guy, but like I said, he was hard work to him was actually physically working. So he would when we were young, we were on our farm. We actually had a museum with a whole lot of bygone era stuff and that, and it was like immaculate. But he'd do everything. We had a huge hedge around our house, and he'd cut it by hand with the clippers, like in that. So stupid stuff, really. Dig all the drains by hand and what have you. But when there was even drain diggers, he'd still be out there digging drains. So it was sort of like there's practicality and there's that. So anyway, so through that, so like when my father, through my childhood and stuff, he was quite often sick. He ended up in hospital and that. So I'd sort of be milking and helping out with farm work and stuff like that. So I started out in a primary school and went to a Catholic school. I was brought up a Catholic, and we used to go to church every Sunday, right up until I was sort of 15. So I did have a bit of an upbringing with, within religion, I suppose. But it's, I never knew who Jesus was, so it was sort of that was a huge barrier for me. So as we were growing up, we were in a small town like Opunaki. We were always sort of people's expectations of they put you in a place and that's where you are and you're going to stay there. So I always had a natural talent for something. Like my mother used to tell me, any tradesman or that used to come to work on a farm or fix something, that I used to drive them nuts because I'd be asking them, what's that? What are you doing? Why are you doing that? So it's always been within me to actually, I've got a brain like an engineer brain. I've got to understand things, how they work. So, and once I understand them, I sort of can excel in what that field is or whatever. So it's quite interesting, So it's sort of, neighbours and people at school and stuff like that, they always put you in a category that. So when through my primary school and that, like I say, I started at a primary school and I went to a Catholic school, but the teachers who were nuns, they were pretty vicious to me, so they used to sort of beat me up. So it's sort of, because I was a bit of a mischief child, I had a lot of energy, so it sort of, it didn't help. So my parents took me out of that school and I went to a primary school, back to the primary school. So I got on really well there, sort of had a great time. I had a really good teacher that sort of used to let me cruise along. But unfortunately, half my life I spent running around the field. It'd be like, it was probably a bit disruptive and things like that. So they'd send me out and run me around the field a few times, and I'd come back panting like a dog, smiling away, and they'd send me back out again. So it's sort of, my schooling wasn't that great really. So it was, but when I got to high school and stuff like that, it was the same sort of thing, sort of carry on, but it wasn't that sort of. I did do a lot of lines and stuff when I was at high school. And but I was at high school, and a lot of the teachers couldn't be bothered with me because I was the same sort of thing. But the teachers that did cotton on to me, I really excelled in their classes, like topped out So part of that was engineering, sciences, and things like that. Maths I was alright at, but it's the English and that sort of stuff I didn't have a lot of time for. So that's sort of, being brought up through those ages and stuff, like I say, we had I'll just sort of skip through all that, but it's being brought up in a small town that when you were 15 years old, you were expected to leave school and go and work on the farm or get a job or do whatever. So unfortunately, my father, because of his health and stuff like that, he sort of, I used to live through his, I was living my life through his eyes sort of thing. So he wanted me to go into the Navy, so I was sort of, Dad, I'll do that just to please him. So I sort of went and applied to the Navy and sat the exams and got in, and then I thought, boy, I don't really want to go into the Navy. So I told him that, and he wasn't too happy about it, but and sort of wondered what I was going to do. So I sort of went farming for a little bit, but I absolutely hated that because I didn't really like discipline, and milking cows twice a day is a big discipline. So it's so I ended up getting an apprenticeship. So I'd done a mechanical apprenticeship and started out in Opunaki, and unfortunately my boss was a very, very hot-headed man. So I can tell you one thing, I learnt more in a year than what I'd ever learnt in my lifetime, and half it was running down the road as fast as I could with spanners flying around my head. So It's, yeah, I got a few stories there, I'll tell you. But it's, so I sort of, got out of that. I thought, no, this is, I'm not going to last the distance if I stay here. So I ended up, so in the meantime, my parents had actually separated. So my mother had met, she finally didn't meet a man at the time, but she met someone else, and she moved up to New Plymouth. She worked in the bank, so, and it was, so I sort of went over to that, ended up living with Mum, and went to New Plymouth, and it really changed my life. I got a job with a guy, he was a very sick guy as well, but I sort of, within a very short time, I was sort of pretty much running the whole workshop and everything else because of his health and stuff like that. So I'd done an apprenticeship and finished that, but the day I finished, I left. So it was a thing. But as well as that, I was a very good athlete. I just had a natural ability. I suppose it's from running around the field all my life. But it was, I was very good at running, and I was very good at triathlons, and I was involved with the surf club and rugby and different cycling. I was a really good cyclist. So I sort of, that was a sort of bit of a passion of mine. So I sort of done that. Then I went to, when I was 21, I went overseas and lived in, went over with a friend, and this is how naive we are. We arrived in London. I'd never been on a big plane in my life or anything else. Went straight to London. We arrived at the airport, and a friend was supposed to come and pick us up, and he didn't turn up. We thought, we'll catch a cab in town for the night, and we'll catch him up the next day. This is in London. I hadn't ever heard of the underground or anything. Just had no idea. So he turned up, and he had an old combi, so we jumped in that and went up to a place called Chester. And I can still remember sitting on the M1 and just sitting there, both of us were just, my friend himself who came with me, we were hanging onto the seat because there's just cars flying up left and right, and he was sort of half turning around talking to us in this old beat up combi, doing 120 k's up the motorway. It was like, couldn't believe it. So that was quite an eye-opener really, but we sort of came back down to London reasonably quick, and we sort of wandered around town there for a few days, and then we brought our own combi. And I can still remember driving around London thinking, there's lots of traffic going that way, it's got to be going somewhere, I'll just follow it. So I had a bit of a baptism in fire. I remember taking to a friend of mine to the train station. It was about 5 minutes away from my house where I live once, but I couldn't get home. It took me 3 hours. So it's just things like that. But within 2 years, I knew London like the back of my hand. I could actually bike from one end of London to the other faster than what anyone could drive. So through the canals and stuff like that. So you do learn pretty quick. But so I worked over in London for a bit, and we saved up and went over to Europe. And this about the third year I was there, I started cycling, mountain biking and stuff. We'd brought mountain bikes and took them around Europe with us. And I'd done a couple of races in England and got picked up into a cycle team. So I was pretty much one of the first Kiwis to ever ride mountain bikes in Europe. And so I got a sponsored ride over there for a while, and done that for about a year. But I was a very strong cyclist, so I was sort of, but I had a job, and I was the mule that used to bike up the hills really fast. So I didn't like that so much, and they had the big boys up the front that didn't have to do all the work, and sort of so. I sort of quit it after a year, and but in the meantime, my father had actually come overseas. He sold his farm, and he came over. He's travelling around the world, so him and I ended up. We got a brand new Land Rover, and we built a safari vehicle out of it. So he was going to travel around the world and that, but he. So I was going to go through Africa with him. So I actually stopped and. He was travelling around anyway. He got sick. He got brucellosis, and they didn't want to know about him over there, and they had no idea what brucellosis is. It's a disease you get from the cows. It's like a really bad flu, but it's so anyway they sent him home. So I decided that I'd come home and just see what's going on and stuff like that. So I came home, and all my friends were actually going through Africa. So I waited a year, and they all turned up. Then in that process, I sort of decided that I might go over and have another go at cycling. So I went down to Queenstown for the winter to actually, we planned to go down there and to ski, so we just skied for the winter. And we're down there and stuff like that. So I ended up in Queenstown in 1990. And so I was there for the summer, but I went to fill in for a friend of mine in a Japanese restaurant as a dishwasher. So it was really funny because I still remember I was helping a friend of mine plumbing as well during the day. So I was on a jackhammering rocks all day and then trying to wash dishes at night time with hands going like this. It was it was pretty interesting. But it's so I was only filling in for about 3 weeks, but I actually, the boys that work there, the Japanese guys that work there, and they really took a shining to me and really liked me. So within 2 years, I was out the front making sushi. So, I was actually taught by a sushi master. So, it's a talent so I'm very sort of artistic with my hands and stuff like that. It's it's a part of that. People think, oh, that's so diverse in what you do, but it's sort of creative. So I've done that for a couple of years. In the meantime, I'd met my wife, and we had our first child, who's now living in Hamilton. He's a doctor, so this is his first year out in the wards and what have you. So then we went to Japan for a bit, and while we were over there, my wife used to cycle for a guy, and I ended up getting on a team over there. So we'd go over there for a few years, and then Lukey came along. He's my second son. And so we used to go over there each year for a few years, and I was cycling, and just Lukey and Ryan would go to school for a bit, and it was quite good. So, but in the meantime, I built my own restaurant in Queenstown and set a restaurant up in Queenstown. So I was running a restaurant in Queenstown as well. So it was sort of quite hectic, but we managed. So it was good. And so I'd done that for a few years and stuff, but in the meantime, as well as that, I started up a company with a very good friend of mine. We started a chartering business up down in Fiordland. So we were doing fishing, diving and hunting trips, and we had a really old boat. It was like a ghost ship, and it was we had another boat that we'd go out from it and take people diving and hunting and things like that. So. And that was sort of going all right, and in the meantime I was sort of quite an entrepreneur, so I brought another old boat that was a very famous old boat that was built in 1896, and I was restoring it, and I was going to put it on the lake as a floating restaurant. So I had these 2 boats and stuff, but so the first boat that I had, it was called the Queen of Beauty. It was it's got amazing history, but it's some horrible people come and robbed me on it and stole all the good bits off it. So it was sort of a start in some ways of a bit of a up and down sort of a yo-yo ride. So, the big boat we had down Doubtful Sound, it was 80 metres, 80 feet long, sorry, and it was, we got caught out in a really, really bad storm. It was moored, and my friend who is in partnership with me, him and his father, and they couldn't get it going, so they came out to fix a part that they needed to fix, and in the meantime, the water had washed all over it, and got very heavy, and it ended up banging its bottom up and down on a reef and sank. So that was a major catastrophe at the time, because the media got a hold of it, and they're going to use us as an example, because a big company down here didn't want us there. So we managed to sneak in the middle of the night through the most horrendous storm with pumps and stuff like that, and pumped it out, and we towed it up, right back up into the headwaters of Doubtful Sound. So it was really funny, because I can still remember we towed this great big boat with a little boat. So it was like, we were going up, and Rob and I, that's the guy I was involved with, we were standing, and his father's on the CV just swearing at us, telling us to steer the ship. We couldn't do anything because you couldn't control it, and it was flying from one side of the field to the other, dragging the other boat around. It was sort of. So we got it up to the thing, we tied it up to the wharf for 10 days, and I'd spent 3 days solid diving on it, just blocking up the holes, trying to stop the water coming in. So we took everything we could off it and towed it out to sea. So it was to meet another boat that was coming around, and the other boat was delayed because the big boat that was going to tow it back to Bluff. But unfortunately for us, it was we said, well, look, we can't wait around, we're going to start towing it, knowing damn well that we weren't going to get too far with it. So there's only there were 3 people that know about it. There's about 2 left, so so we'll keep that one there. But so that was quite tragic, but it's a silly thing really, because it was sort of right through that. It was, the whole time we were so busy that I was taking stuff off it, and the stuff we took off it never used or anything really, but it was a waste of time. But we actually put it on another boat. A lot of the stuff we put on another boat that had been there for 30 years. Within 2 weeks that sank. We got a ring one night saying, "Oh, you better get over here because all your stuff's floating down the fjord." So it was absolute nightmare. So we got that was all sorted. But some good news through that was that my wife was having her third child, so and we found out it was a little girl, so that sort of really boosted me up, and it was great because it took a lot of convincing for her to have another one, and it was so it was fantastic news during it. So that sort of went on, and then after that, but I've jumped ahead a little. I'll just tell you what happened. So the restaurant I had, it was right on the waterfront, and in 1999 we had a major flood, and I got totally wiped out, got flooded out completely. But 2 weeks before we got flooded, I had a business partner in it, and I paid him in cash, paid him money to buy him out, because I wanted to go into a different direction and change it. So, and 2 weeks later we got flooded and I lost the whole lot. So it was sort of, so within that, then the other boat sinking, another boat being robbed, and it was sort of, so there's a lot of things going on there, but it was, so quite tragic. But I'm just sort of jumping through because it's sort of, I'm trying to get to where I'm going. So, there's lots of like my sporting activities and that. I used to be paraponting, mountaineering, climbing, just absolutely. But I've never done anything. I used to disappear in the mountains for a week and come back. No one would ever be worried about me because they know that I'd be, I never used to go into things, but that is actually because I've always known God's with me. I've always had an angel there that's just overlooking. Like, and it's making decisions that are not stupid decisions. Everything's a choice really, and it's how you perceive it and how you actually tackle it too. So I'm not the most organised guy in the world, but I'm not the most stupidest either. So it's so there's something there that's so all this stuff happened, and I sort of started doing so. Through this process, like I built my own restaurant, built the chairs, furniture, absolutely everything, and every part of it I built myself. So, and in that, I was a very good chef as well. So I actually used to do a lot of, I used to get invited by big wine companies to match food with wine. So I sort of took that line for a while, and I was doing shop fitting out in Queenstown. So I was designing up shops and things like that too, and like making every part of it too. So learning from the hard way, like it was all by hand, very hard for me to explain, trying to what I'm going to do. So they just, you go for it, and so it was okay. So from there, we sort of getting up to where. So I started working up, and so I went to do a vintage up in Hawke's Bay, a place called Sacred Hill. I was doing quite a bit of work with them at one stage. And they were building a big fermentation room, and the guy that was the project manager on it, he sort of lost the plot. So they thought, he's got a pretty natural ability, we'll throw him in there and see how he gets on. So I actually ended up project managing their red fermentation room. So that's sort of the start of the journey of where I am now. So I done that, and in the meantime I started, I had a challenge in that there's a lot of wine barrels in the wine industry. They use them for 3 years and they throw them out because they don't get the same contact with the wine and stuff after that time. So there's a couple of things within that I've done. Is that what could I do with it? So I went through a whole process of what so I can straighten them out, turn them into this or that, or do whatever. But I thought I'll try and utilise what they are. So I started designing furniture, and it became a really popular. But for me, it also became a thing. It was like an object of desire, so I hated that. It was like everyone just, I couldn't really understand it, so I sort of went away from that. But I then got invited back down to Central Otago and got a job with Central Otago Wine Company. So I took their winery. They were a little 50-tonne winery, and I took it up to 100-tonne. So I designed every part of that process, the whole wastewater system, the filtration systems, the processing systems, absolutely heating, cooling, and like no idea, just sort of like this is how you do it, and like researching and sort of. So there was an ability there that sort of it just grew and grew. So I sort of done that for about 5 years and had a workshop there and sort of still made furniture and things like that in the meantime. So that sort of that was that. But in that meantime, unfortunately, my marriage had fallen over. So it was. It was pretty tough really, but so I'll just two things. Sorry, I jump around a bit because I'm already thinking before I've said so. But the first encounter I really ever had with God is that, like I say, I was brought up in a Catholic church, but I used to go to church on a Sunday and I'd be like there and I'd see old Holy Joe down on his knees praying away and he'd be up giving Holy Communion and sort of like that. Next thing he'd be out the back having a cigarette talking about everybody, and sort of, and I'd be looking at it go, man, what are these guys about? Then I'd be off down to the pub after that and sort of like getting up to no good. So sort of for me, I was sort of quite observant. I've always sort of observed, and that was sort of like, so I never really could understand it. So that was a big barrier to me. So I didn't understand. So that was that. But my mother, she was a Christian. She became a Christian way back in the early 80s. So after the marriages had split up. So she was sort of on to me in that. So I sort of, anyway, she took me along to a Bill Zabriskie thing one night. So it was a big conference sort of thing in New Plymouth. And we were sitting there, and I always can tell, like I get this feeling when I know it's a Holy Spirit encounter because I can smell incense. It's just like a wafting around the whole. It's amazing. And next thing I'm sort of sitting there, and I'm just like this, and I'm looking around, going, man, what am I doing? It's like, geez, I've got my hands in the air, and it's like, this is really weird. So I was like trying to put them down. I was sort of stuck up here. I was like, So that was my first encounter with a sort of a Holy Spirit encounter, really. And I sort of, I'm not too sure about this one. So it's sort of, that was God saying, look, I've got you, I've got my hand on you, And it was like, as much as I tried to deny it for years and years and years, I've always known that He's been there. So it was, so that was the start, and then another night. So we're going back to where I left off now. So another night when we were down in Central, I lived in Central Otago, and I was biking up a hill, up a mountain one night, because mountain biking sort of I used to do. So I was biking up a hill, and I had my second encounter with the Holy Spirit, and it was like I was biking up the hill, and all of a sudden this thing came on my back and just pushed me. And I was biking up the hill, and it was the most euphoric feeling that you could imagine. It was like, wow, that's just absolutely amazing, It's like just unbelievable. I'm biking up a mountain called Mount Difficulty with, a lot of junk going on in my life. So it was, but yeah, it sort of still denied it. Sort of still wanted that sort of secular, go down to the pub on a Friday night and sort of do this and that and everything else. So that was a sort of second, after that. So after my marriage had broken up, and I actually got into a relationship with a winemaker, and we got on fantastic. It started out really well, but she got frightened, and she just went bang. No, I'm out of here. You're gone. But I couldn't understand it. But the horrible thing was about it is that she made me feel dumb. So I really started questioning myself. And it was a breakdown over that time. It was like God, God's got an amazing sense of humour when you sort of how He brings things about. So that was the start of it. But one day then I just couldn't understand it. Every song I listened to, everything on the secular world, it was all about this broken relationship sort of thing. And I was like, it was just a horrible feeling. And it was sort of like, and I'd sort of. The hard thing was that I'd introduced my children to it, so it was sort of, brought them into it, and it was horrible, really. So from there, it was sort of like, so I really questioned myself. So the first thing I did is am I dumb? So it was sort of, so I thought, because telling the people I'm not the most organised person, or and it's like writing things down. I hate that sort of nitty-gritty stuff. I'm a bit of a trailblazer, always have been. So. I like to be out the front there, sort of thinking up all the ideas and doing all this and all that. So anyway, I thought, I need to find out. So first thing I did, I went to see a psychiatrist, and I said, is there something wrong with me? So she gave me a whole lot of tests and that, and I said, because I thought maybe I've got ADHD or something. It's like, so they got it there all clear. No, there wasn't anything there. She said, you're quite amazing, really. It's it's not you. I wouldn't worry about it. It's actually, this is what's happened to. So that was a bit of clarity, but so I ended up going to university. So I was 45 when I went to university. So I started there, and I was supposed to go straight into a master's. So I'd finished the harvest, and they'd let me off on the first semester and to go into the second. And so I finished that, and I just went in boots and all. I used to work from 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, right through to 2 o'clock the next morning, just learning programs and learning how to use a computer properly and learning bibliography. Because I just never learnt any of this stuff at school, so I had no idea whatsoever. So I sort of threw myself totally immersed in that. Anyway, the course that I was on, there were some young guys in the course as well, and they're just really, really nice guys. Just they love the Lord with all their heart, but they never ever used to go, oh, you need to do this, and it's just they were just my mates, and they were much younger than me. But they just sort of, I just looked at them, I thought, man, there's something about these guys that's really, really good, It's like, so what happened there was that, pretty much sort of ended up hanging out with these guys and stuff, and I ended up going to church, and just like that, I sort of, that was a big answer to me. All of a sudden I found it. My problem was that I never knew who Jesus was, but God had given me a prayer, and the prayer was Our Father. And it was the Lord's Prayer. And he actually told me, like I can still remember vaguely, you've got to learn this prayer. You've got to learn what it means. And it was like, so I actually, because like I say, I never knew, when I brought up as a Catholic, it was like, you go and see the old priest and you tell him what you've done bad, and he'd tell you go and say a few Hail Marys. So, Mary was a lot easier to pray to than what, I thought God was a bit tough, Jesus was a bit hard, so... It was, because I had no understanding of who or what he was. So it didn't happen straight away, but just all of a sudden, all I was interested in doing is reading the Bible. I just gave up everything else really. Just read it. Read every help book I could get to sort of understand, and because my background with a brain like I've got to understand it to believe it. So once I actually get to there, so that's been broken down to me over the years, and it's been quite, so that's a huge part of where I am today with the, and it is, and to me it's about the relationship with Christ, he's at the centre of it, and everything else revolves around that. So it's, in my mind there's no denying it. No one can change my mind on that. And it's quite interesting because a lot of 90% of my friends have actually ditched me over the years. Ever since I've become a Christian, they just hate it. I've tried to talk to them, I've explained to them, it's like, but that's fine with me. I don't mind that at all, because I'm steadfast in what I believe. So it's, it's not easy, for me it's like, because you never think you're good enough, or you never, you've got old Satan in the background there just trying to smash you all the time, just trying to tell you you're not good enough, or you're this, or you're that, but I can actually relate to that because of where I've been and how I've come about to it. It's not, I haven't had a seriously tragic story that's actually just gone like that. It's actually been a breaking down the whole time of actually, like bringing it all through. So it's, so in the meantime, so it was down there, I finished at the winery and went to university, but at university I was there for the first year, then they didn't know what to do with me because I was too advanced for what they were doing. So, which was quite interesting. So they gave me the option. They said, look, we don't know what you're going to do with you because it's, like this is what it is. We can't give you the degree, but you have to, you've got options. So they sent me off to university to do papers. So I'd done those for another year and a half, and sort of with an accumulation of everything else that sort of came about. So it's. So anyway, in the meantime, I was still doing a lot of chartering. I've always done chartering down in Fiordland, and I also ended up fishing. An engineering friend of mine who was my mentor, so anything I ever thought of he could make, sort of thing. So he was hugely influential to me right through my earlier days and stuff like that. And he had a major heart attack skiing and died. So I went to help him in his company. I sort of went there to help out in design and things like that. So that was quite an opening for me. They brought a CEO, and within a year he had totally destroyed the company. So it was quite sad, really. But that's through that, like I say, I was still doing some chartering. But I developed a fish process system for a friend of mine who's a cod fisherman. So, and because we used to charter, like we used to fish out of, we used to go and chase northern bluefin up out of Greymouth and West Coast, and sort of fishing and hunting and like. But the thing is that through all that, I could see God's glory. Once I became a Christian, and that it just totally changed my perspective of everything. And for me, it was an appreciation of, wow, this is just, like I've diving down a Fiordland is just like something you can't experience. It's unbelievable. And like just the beauty of everything, like I've really picked up, and really it's about praise and worship to God about the beauty that I've seen. So I see good things in all things. It's You know, like through that time, it's also like God's been breaking down. I was a prideful person. You know, it was actually about my pride. And part of my challenge, like people used to come to me and go, "Could you make that?" Yeah, I could do that. Whether I could or not, I'd give it a go. So it was sort of, you know, it was all about the challenge or the pride, you know, and it's sort of like that. That's all been broken from me. So now it's actually like a purpose. So it's so with what I'm doing. So while I was at university, I started developing what I'm doing now. So what I'm doing is building modulated buildings. So I've designed them for disaster relief, so they can withstand hurricanes and all sorts of stuff. They're totally flat pack, they're totally self-level. And they're all modulated that you can grow them, you can put one onto another. They can even float on a lake. They can go up and down on a pole for flooded areas and things like that. So you can construct them in a day. They're fully insulated, so I'm just doing a hard shell version of it at the moment. So they can flat pack right down, so you can just buy a box and within a day you can have a house that you can live in. It can be fully self-contained. It's got its own sewage system, its own solar power system and everything else. So the only outside source that you need is water. So that's what we're working on. We're getting there. So it's but in the meantime, I was quite challenged because I'm a designer and I was really struggling with everything that I was doing with it because it's such a big project. So I brought in a business partner, and unfortunately he was a Christian guy that I sort of went to school with, so he sort of semi-knew him and sort of trusted him. He'd been a big CEO of a couple of big broadcasting outfits and stuff like that. So he came along and I had a chat with him. I actually met his father, and his father said, "Oh, you should ring this guy and have a chat with him." And see. So I did that, and he sort of, come along, you had all that, and it was sort of, this is what we can do, this is what I do. And I thought, oh, that's fantastic, because that's what I need. You know, like it's like, if you do that bit, I'll carry on and do my bit. So you know, he came into it, and within a very short time, it was all talkie and no walkie. So it came to a crucial spot of it that it was quite dire. So I said, look, this is not going to work. So unfortunately, I've never ever heard language like it, and from coming out of a Christian man's mouth, it was just, oh boy. So anyway, so he held me to ransom, so I've had to buy him out, and it's sort of, so part of the reason why I'm going back to Auckland is because of that. So I need to sort of regroup, and I was really unable to utilise what I've got down here because I spent most of my time in Auckland anyway. So it's, so I just need to get it to this next stage to then I can sort of branch out from there. So so anyway, from the time, I won't leave you too much longer, but so while I'm working on this project, I've had some horrendous roadblocks. One of them was that from diving and fishing, hunting and being in a cold climate for years and years, skiing, and I was kayaking once, just broke my nose and never done anything about it and things like that. So I ended up with a sinus infection, and the sinus infection was actually killing me. And it was it was so bad they couldn't actually treat the infection I had in my head. So they just kept giving me drugs and drugs and drugs, and you had to take them and stuff. And they gave me a drug called prednisone. It actually ended up sending me blind. So more or less, I had 2 cataracts, but I had cataracts that only ever diabetics, serious diabetics get. They're actually it's a cataract on the convex of the eye, not the exterior. So that was they had operations on that, got new lenses and what have you, and had a lot of laser surgery and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I had about 3 operations on my sinuses, like serious operations to try and clear the blockage out enough to kill the disease. So yeah, I've overcome that sort of thing. So through this project, I've tried to work through. So I had that to cope with first, and then I had the cataracts. So that was sort of, it's been a real struggle. Then unfortunately, I was down on the boat. I was doing some chartering down in Fiordland, and I came off the boat and I got really sick. I got back to Queenstown and I got really sick. And I sort of, what was I could do? I was in bed and I just crawl out of bed, couldn't even hardly walk. But I had to still drive around down the bluff and do some certain jobs and that. So I was just absolutely crawling. And so I managed to get well enough, and then I got back to Auckland and had some blood tests, and they turned around and said, "Oh, there's something seriously wrong with you. We don't know what it is, but because of your health, it's like maybe it's your sinuses or something. We'll keep an eye on you." So So that went on for a while, and I had a whole lot of tests and stuff like that, but they never ever, so my eyes are a medical misdemeanor. Then this is now a medical misdemeanor as well. So what had actually happened was that I had burst appendix. So this happened in October. So I got to the point that all I wanted to do was crawl into a hole. I thought I was going mad because I didn't want to work. I just had no. I just wanted to sleep the whole time. I couldn't quite work it out, but I kept pushing myself. And I got to the point that my brother had actually gone away. I was living with him. I was prototyping down on his farm, and I went home for lunch one day, and I wasn't feeling too well, and I had a bit of lunch, and I lay down on the couch. I thought, I must have given myself food poisoning. Couldn't work it out. So, and this is how stupid I am. Is that so that night my workshop was still unlocked, so it was about 3k down the road. So I thought, I'll go and run it off. So I ran down to my workshop, locked it up, and ran home again. So anyway, I got home. I thought, oh no, this is not good. I don't feel good at all. So I went to bed and thought I'd be all right the next morning. So I woke up the next morning, this is no good at all. So I went and done dragged myself out of bed, went and done a few chores, got back. I went into septic shock. So I ended up, so I knew I had an option. I was so lying there, and I thought, well, what are my options? If I ring someone to come and get me, by the time they get here, I could be gone. Or if I try and drive, it's just too dangerous. So I rang up 911 or whatever it is, and I couldn't even talk on the phone. I was just throwing up bile, just like absolutely gone. So they tracked the phone down and come and drag me off in the old meat wagon, and it was quite funny because I still remember going to the hospital, and I thought it's the first time I ever thought, man, these roads are bumpy. It was horrible. So I got down to the hospital and got in there. They didn't know what to do with me, so it was they sent me off to another hospital. So we had I was with another old lady that had a heart attack. So they had two patients, myself and the lady with the heart attack. And my nurse, that was because I had a special care nurse to make sure that anyway, she got car sick about halfway through the thing. So we're driving through to the next hospital, and she was stopping every 5 minutes for her to be sick, and that was just So I got in there, and I was stuck in there till about 3 o'clock in the morning. They finally thought, no, we don't know what's wrong. We'll have to give you a scan. So as soon as they saw that I had burst appendix, and unfortunately it sort of welded to my bladder by then. It was, I was in serious septicemia, so I was in septic shock. So it was, so they told me right then. They said, mate, you're going to be in there for a while, so just expect to be. So they done emergency surgery on me, and managed to do keyhole. I was very, very lucky. Within 3 days I bounced up and I was out. It was like, it just felt so much, but I was in serious trouble for a long time. Like if I bent my arm like that on my leg, I wouldn't be able to straighten it. I'd tear the muscles off my arm. Just I was so poisoned that it was thing. So that was another thing. I had a truck, and I had been down to Taranaki, and I was working on this project, and this car was parked on the side of the road that was on a stop sign, and it was a sort of rush hour in town. And he thought I was in a big truck. I'd brought a truck, and he went straight under my back wheel. So I ended up flying through the thing, took out a big light post, and ended up smashing out a big concrete wall. Ended up with a cab smashed all around me, but same thing again, I got such a fright, I jumped out and pretended I was all right. So it wasn't until the next day that I sort of wasn't so good. So yeah, it's certain things like this that are throwing me out, but right through it all, I know God's got my hand, and I know that He's there with me. It's like, and I know it's not over. It's like another little story I'll just tell you quickly. I know I'm going over a bit, but I was kite surfing one day, and I was on the beach, and this guy gave me a hand to put my kite up, and he was actually an instructor, and he had a whole group of kite surfers down there. Anyway, he sort of was in a hurry, and he threw my kite up, and it wasn't quite ready, but accumulation of stupid things. I'd lost the little thing that holds your kite onto your harness, so I found a stick, and I jammed that in there. So anyway, my kite took off, and I screamed. I ran out of legs pretty quick and got towed along the beach. And then it sort of powered up, and then I got smashed into a big sandbank, and the kite powered up, and I shot out of there like Superman. And the whole time I'd pulled every lever I could find, and nothing was coming apart. So I was flying up there, and I was trying to pull the stick out. I can still remember flying up over these pine trees, and all these people just screaming, going, "Oh, he's going to die, he's going to die!" And all I knew was that, nah, not today. I just knew God had God had my hand, it's just like, we're going to hit those trees and we're going to grab onto it, and it's like, by that time the stick came out and everything happened how I thought it would happen. So it was, just so I could tell you, there's a lot of stuff like that, but it's, I've been very, very fortunate with my time, and it's, so my journey at the moment is to regroup. Like the project I'm working on, I've prayed about it and everything. I actually went to, it was quite interesting because when I first came about it, I actually went to every meeting I'd go to that was sort of like a conference or anything else. Someone would come and say, you're a builder and you're building this, and it's like, so I'm, it's confirmation of what I'm doing, what I should be doing. But it's not easy, it's super hard. It's just, one thing is to make something simple and affordable is very, very hard in this day and age, especially with the size that I've created and things like that. And the other part is that it's like trusting people, and that like I've got to take that away, and it's like God's teaching me a lesson all the time, and it's like, don't trust that, trust me, just trust me, keep your eyes on me. And there's a couple of verses and stuff like that sort of so one sort of, it's quite interesting because I was sort of reading, I really enjoy reading the Word for Today. I find that really inspirational, and like I read the Bible every day, and it's amazing. So the one of the, like I said, the Lord's Prayer, and it was actually breaking it down. And it started out with Our Father in Heaven. Who is our Father in Heaven, and how does He come about? How's our relationship to that? Hallowed be your name. Hallowed is that glorify Him. It's that glorify the name of God, and your kingdom come. Knowing that He is with you. It's so on and so forth. Sort of. So it's so the other the one that sort of has recently come to me is that there's a couple here that sort of I'll just find it, and I just got it on here. It's actually Jesus walking on the water. I'll just tell you because I haven't got the things up there, but it's like the other day, and it was sort of wait a second. I'll just sorry, wait a second. Yeah, it's Matthew 14:22-33, and it's immediately Jesus made His disciples get into a boat. So they'd been on the mountainside and feeding the loaves and the fishes and everything else, and it's really amazing. And so they immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat on ahead of Him to the go on ahead of Him to the other side. Well, He dismissed the crowd. After He dismissed them, He went up on a mountainside by Himself to pray. So at the start of that, it's like Moses going up to the mountain, and face of Moses, no one could look at Moses because of the glory of God on his face. So this is, so that was a sort of, so Jesus was up alone with God on the mountain, and He, when He came down, so then He, later that night, He was alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because of the wind against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw Him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. Well, that's the kind of glory of God. Jesus was glowing, but not just His face, His whole body. So it was like this thing, like it was this beam of light walking across the water. So it's like when in your deepest storm and your hardest things, and that, like you see that, and He said, "Don't worry, it's me." And as soon as they done that, the water calmed, and it was always looked at Jesus. Like just always look at the light, no matter what the situation is. And being a Christian, it's a win-win, because no matter what happens, if you truly believe, you're going to heaven. There's no doubt about it. We're on earth as humans, and we're never going to be up to the expectations of what we should think we should be with God, but never ever take your eyes off Jesus. No matter what you do, He is always there, and it's the glory of God that through Him. So that's quite And so that's quite amazing how, like it sort of, and then it's Peter, and then he walked out on the water and he realised what was happening and he took his eyes off Jesus. And what happened? He sank. It's like, so you've got to believe that. And there's so many, and that's what I love about the Bible and the scriptures and everything, because there's an answer for absolutely everything that you can. Sometimes you go dry, other times it just comes and whacks you. It's just amazing. Just, wow, that's me. That comes out to me. So that's sort of, well, another one that I really like as well is that, this was in the word for today the other day. God has deposited within you something he wants you to recognise, nurture and use for his glory. When he blesses it, you'll be amazed from the underdeveloped potential you've been running around with. So everyone's got a natural talent. Whatever that natural talent, it doesn't matter who you are, what you are, God has given you a purpose and he's given you something to grasp and he wants you to develop that. So don't ever be discouraged. Just be encouraged to know that God's got your back. So because other people can't tell you that, that's your relationship with God. So I think that's quite important. And it's, so that's sort of pretty much, and Psalms as well. I know the Lord is always with me. I will not be shaken, for his right hand, for he is right beside me. That's Psalm 16:8. Another Psalm, Psalm 40. I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined and heard me cry. He lifted me up from the mire. He lifted me up from the pit of despair, out of the mire and clay. He set my feet upon the rock. That's Jesus Christ. So, and made my footsteps firm. So you just got to believe that and keep going, because like God's got your back. And he put a new song in my mouth, and that's like me. He put a new song in my mouth. I changed once God had touched me, because right through, like even now and again, I still go back. Sometimes I do a bit of swearing and a bit of this, but now I'm very conscious about it. So quickly, it's like, so I'll bring that back. But you're not perfect, but praise and worship to me is such a beautiful thing, and it's like worship songs. And a song I really love, and I love the version Christine DeMarchio sings, and it as well, and it's well with my soul. And when you actually know that story, it's such an amazing song, so through it all, he's there. So, and another one quite important for me, like I was brought up, like I said, brought up in a small town, and that, every week when we were young kids and going out, my sister was killed in a motor car accident from the driver was being stupid. Like we used to, every weekend someone would get killed or die or have a terrible crash or something like that, just beer, too much, parties, sort of things like that. So Proverbs is always an important one. It's like, so Proverbs 20 is one, is always, and it's something that hits me all the time, is that wine is a mocker and beer is a brawler. Whoever is led astray by them is not wise. So that sort of helps me keep on track to like I don't want that. That's actually I want to stay on the right path. So we'll leave it at that. I'm sorry for boring you too much, but thank you very much.
Wow, what a story! I told you guys we were in for a treat. This man's been through it, but he survived it. He's come out stronger, and what a testimony. Let's give him another hand, and we'll